The ARC of Pennsylvania hosts Disability Rights Pennsylvania for a presentation, Understanding Your Voting Rights and Pennsylvania's Rules, Webinar Series, Part 1, Self-Advocates. This is a presentation by Jennifer Garman Esquire. She is the Director of Government Affairs with Disability Rights Pennsylvania.
So again, I'm with Disability Rights Pennsylvania. If you're not familiar with our organization, we are the protection and advocacy organization for the state of Pennsylvania. We are essentially a legal services for people with disabilities, and I'm here tonight to talk about voting rights and information. We do have a grant under the Help America Vote Act that allows us to do voting engagement, voting rights trainings, and ensuring that public policy is accessible for the disability community. So why are we here tonight? We'll talk about a few things, but first we're going to talk about why it's important to vote, the types of elections that people vote in, how we register to vote, how to vote, how you cast your ballot if you choose to vote by mail or go to your election, your polling site, what to do if you have a barrier and something happens when you try to exercise your right to vote. And then we'll talk a little bit at the end about how to educate yourself as you prepare to vote. So why is voting important? How does it fit into your life? There are a variety of ways that voting is important. We vote for the president and the vice president every 4 years. We vote for United States senators every 6 years. They're up for election. We vote for members of Congress that are known as representatives, and we vote for state senators and state representatives as well. This November, we'll be having an election for the next governor of Pennsylvania. So those are the really kind of big elections that people tend to get engaged in. But in between or alongside of presidential elections and governor's races, there are races for local mayors, your county commissioners. There can be questions that are put on the ballot about whether a policy should be implemented in Pennsylvania. And then there's obviously also school board elections that can shape how schools are providing education to your local area. And these all can impact your life. And so it's important to be engaged at every level because all of these elections can really influence your life. So let's start by talking about who is eligible. How do you know if you can vote? So first off, you have to register to vote. And to be able to register to vote, you have to be a citizen of the United States for at least 1 month before the election. In Pennsylvania, you have to be a resident of the district that you want to vote in for at least 30 days before the next election. So if you're someone who is preparing for a move right around the start of November this year, you would vote at your previous address. It doesn't mean that you can't vote. It just means that you wouldn't be able to update your voter registration that close to the election. And then most importantly, obviously, you need to be 18 years old on or before the next election. So anyone who is about to turn 18 is also able to register to vote as long as they are 18 before election day. So how do you register to vote? First, it's really important. Sometimes we don't remember. You should check to see if you're registered to vote. You can go to the vote.pa.gov website. There is a place on that website, that's that link there, that you're able to check your voter registration status. If you check and you find out that you're not registered to vote, you can register to vote at any time, but you have to do it at least 15 days before the next election in order to be entered onto what they call the voter rolls and be able to cast a ballot. So the deadline for this November election to register to vote is October 24th, 2022. You can vote, or you can register to vote by a variety of ways. There is an online form that you can submit. You can print off a form and send it in the mail. And you can also register to vote at a number of government agencies. When we renew driver's licenses or non-driver photo IDs, you can register to vote at the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, any driver's license center. And you can also register to vote at state offices that provide public assistance and services to people with disabilities. Just want to mention today is September 20th. It is National Voter Registration Day. So if you are looking for information on how to register to vote in Pennsylvania, many organizations are sharing this information out on how to register here in Pennsylvania, including Disability Rights Pennsylvania, and I'm sure the ARC of PA as well. So how do we vote in Pennsylvania? We have two ways to vote. We'll talk about both of them. You can vote by mail using a mail-in ballot, or you can vote in person at your local polling site. So let's start with mail-in voting. So as of 2019, with the changes in the Pennsylvania election law, now everyone is eligible to vote by mail. Even though everyone is eligible to vote by mail, you still need to apply for a mail-in ballot if you choose to vote by mail. You can go online again to the Department of State PA Voter Services site to fill out that application. You can also fill out a mail-in voting application at your local county election office, or you can request a paper application and send it in the mail. It's really important to note that voters have to apply for a mail-in ballot by November 1st at 5 p.m. So if you are requesting a mail-in ballot, they need to receive that application at your local county election office by 5 p.m. on November 1st. So it's really important, and we'll talk about making a voting plan later, but it's really important to plan this out and to do it as early as you can. So does Pennsylvania have early voting? And if we do, what is it? The answer is yes. And in the mail-in voting context, what this means is that as a voter, you can go to your county election office, submit your mail-in voting application. You can get your mail-in ballot from your county election office at the same time. You can complete your ballot and hand it back in to the county election office. You can do this all in one trip. So if that's what you choose to do, you can submit your mail-in ballot application, receive your actual ballot, and then complete it all in one trip. This means that you don't have to worry about it arriving late in the mail. It also means that you don't have to worry about dropping it off. You need to check, though, with your county election office to find out when it's open. And some counties even have extra offices called satellite offices that have extra hours or extended hours. It's not every county has that, but your county board of elections would be able to share that information. So next, we're going to talk about some common questions about voting by mail and accommodations that people with disabilities are able to receive, including accommodations if you need assistance with completing your paper ballot. So what do I do if I need assistance in marking my paper mail-in ballot? Pennsylvania election law says that you can only have help when a voter's need for assistance is indicated on your voter registration card. So if you're registering to vote for the first time and you know you're going to need assistance, there is a box that you check that can say that you need assistance in voting. This request for assistance or that the checking that needs to be done at least 10 days before the election so that it is included in the book at the county election office. But it's okay. So if you don't indicate that you need assistance, both the voter and the person assisting you needs to document the need for assistance and the fact that they have assisted you in writing, identifying the disability identifying what election they're assisting you in. Both you and the person assisting you sign this document and put it in the outer envelope. Do not include it in the inner secrecy envelope. So there are two envelopes when you vote by mail. The inside one is called the secrecy envelope, and then the outside one is the one that is, you put the secrecy envelope inside the outside mailing envelope and you mail it. Another option that's newer in Pennsylvania since 2020 is what we call the accessible electronic ballot marking. Voters with disabilities can request and use the accessible electronic ballot marking system whenever possible. It allows you as a voter with a disability to mark your ballot privately and independently without assistance. It's an online system. You still need to apply for your mail-in or absentee ballot and then request the remote option by the deadline. I have a link here in the slides about where you can find more information on the Votes PA website. The one thing to note around the accessible electronic ballot marking system, it's called the Omniballot here in Pennsylvania, is that you do still need to print out and mail your ballot back using the secrecy envelope and the outer envelope from your county. So you do still need to print it out. So it's a fully accessible electronic ballot that you complete and then print off and still put in your secrecy envelope and then in the outer envelope and mail it back, just as you would any other ballot. So what should you do if you can't sign the declaration on the back of the outer envelope? So when you're voting by mail, it requires two declarations of the voter. And if the voter can't sign the first declaration because of your disability, the voter can receive assistance to make their mark for both declarations. So someone can assist you in making your mark, and your mark doesn't need to be, your formal signature. It can be whatever you're able to mark it with. If you as a voter receive assistance, a witness must sign below the second declaration and provide their address. Again, do not sign the inner secrecy envelope. This is only the external outside mailing envelope. Only put the voted ballot inside the secrecy envelope. So what should you do if, because of your disability, you're not able to return your mail-in ballot? So you've completed your ballot, you've voted for who you've chosen, you've signed your envelope, or you've had assistance in making your mark on your outer envelope, but now you actually need to either put it in the mail or put it in a drop box in your county. You're able to use what's called a designated agent. Voters with disabilities can designate someone as their agent to either pick up, drop off a mail-in or absentee ballot. In order to designate an agent, you do have to complete a form. That form is provided by the Department of State. Again, it's linked here in both English and Spanish form. We do recommend that you keep a copy of your designated agent form. And how this works is once you've designated an agent and that person has agreed to assist you, the agent needs to bring the completed form along with them, either when they're picking up, if they're helping you to pick up your mail-in ballot, or if they're returning your mail-in ballot, they need to bring the completed form with them. You should never put that declaration again inside the secrecy envelope. The only thing that goes in that secrecy envelope is the mail-in ballot. Who can be a designated agent? Anyone, but you cannot, a designated agent cannot assist more than one voter unless you all live in the same household. So if I'm Jen and I have 3 family members here, I could be the agent for multiple voters here in my household, then that's the only exception. Otherwise, it's one designated agent per one voter.
And this is Katie. I just want to ask a question because I know there might be some confusion.
If someone lives in a community home that we typically call a group home, and there's 2 or 3 of them there, and they have a DSP or direct support professional, is that qualified under that system?
Oh, I should have looked at this before tonight. So what I can tell you is nursing facilities do not qualify as a household under the Department of State guidance. I would want to go back and double check, and if it's okay, I can follow up with you, Katie, and you can send it out to attendees. I'll make a note for that. I just don't want to misspeak. The Department of State, we had advocated to make the household definition a little bit more expansive to recognize the community settings that folks live in, and that the disability community might be somewhat limited if they had a more narrow household definition. But unfortunately, we weren't able to move the needle too much on that, but we do continue to have that discussion. So let me double check on that, and we can follow up with attendees afterwards. So I have a note here that says that some counties might not be familiar with designated agents. Disability Rights Pennsylvania had done some engagement with almost every county in Pennsylvania who did not have information available on their county election office website to encourage them to put information about designated agents out, so that voters who went to look for information would find the form and be notified that this is an option for ballot return and pickup. And many, many counties were happy to share that information. So I do think that many more counties are familiar with this concept. The Department of State has been trying to educate the community as well. So, but if you would run into any issues with the concept of having a designated agent or a county official who's not familiar, you can point them to this Department of State form, and that should educate them. So here I have my note that says the Department of State guidance says that households do not include long-term care facilities, but like I said, we will double check to make sure to answer the question about group homes. So let's talk about voting in person and some barriers that you might come across in voting in person and what to do about them. So when you're voting in person, the first thing that's really, really important to do is to get ready right now, just like you would with voting by mail. First, you're going to want to confirm your polling place. You can look up your polling place, again, on the Department of State website, that pavoterservices.pa.gov. And if the address listed is not your current address, so you're in the process of moving, but you'll be moving polling locations in advance of that timeline to vote at a new place, you can vote at the polling place that's listed on the website where you're registered, or you can go to the polling place for your current address and vote using a provisional ballot while they would wait to check and see your updated address. You can look for polling places, again, by using this website that locates polling sites. It's also really, really important to check for polling place accessibility. I recognize that it is 2022 and places should be both compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act as well as other access rules for polling places in particular. But the reality is that there are still polling sites that have accessibility barriers, particularly for people using mobility devices. So what we recommend is that voters can contact their county board of elections to find out and ask if their polling place is accessible. You can also look for accessibility information, again, on that Department of State website. They have information about accessibility of polling locations. If you get to your polling site and the location is not accessible, you should ask to talk to the judge of elections. The judge of elections should work to modify or remedy the accessibility barrier by getting a temporary ramp into the door. Some things we see in election years are things like the ramp at the top, or the door at the top of the accessible ramp not being unlocked. So that really, they just have to open and unlock the doors so that someone who gets to the top of the ramp is able to get into the polling site. There are temporary, relatively inexpensive accessibility things like a portable ramp that they could put in order to provide accessibility. If the judge of elections is not able to help you, you can ask to talk to the county board of elections, and that would be calling your county office and raising the concern. We do deal with accessibility issues almost every election. There's not a ton of them, I would say. It doesn't mean that there aren't issues, but certainly there are there is a process, and you can contact, like I said, the judge of elections and then the county board of elections. And there are groups that do polling place accessibility surveys and make recommendations on increasing accessibility at different points in the election cycles. So when you go to vote in person, one really commonly asked questions is, do I need to show an identification? So most people in Pennsylvania do not have to show an ID to vote. Pennsylvania law only currently requires that you show identification if it's your first time voting at that polling site, or if it's your first time voting. So if you've moved and you're new to your polling location, you need to show your ID, or if it's your first time voting because you're a newly registered voter or you've just turned 18, you will need to show identification. So what counts as a valid photo identification is a driver's license or a PennDOT non-driver photo ID. Other types of government IDs like passports. Non-photo IDs do need to have your name and address on them. So it could be your confirmation, your voter registration card that you get from your county voter registration office. It could be a utility bill, a bank statement, your paycheck, or any government check that people receive would all be acceptable forms of ID. So here are some commonly asked questions about what to do if you encounter accessibility concerns and need accommodations on election day when you're going to vote in person. So again, what if I need assistance marking my ballot when I'm at my polling location? If you as a voter need assistance and there's no information in the polling book, so remember we talked before about when you're voting and you need assistance that you can check that, or when you're registering, you can check the box to say that you need assistance. That would be recorded in the polling book. If you didn't check that box, it's no problem. What you would need to do is complete a declaration saying that you need assistance. And there's a link to that form here in the slide. It's a simple form that just says, I'm a voter and I need assistance, and here's what I need. You can receive assistance by anyone except the judge of elections or an agent or representative of your employer or your union if you are a union member. Don't be afraid to tell poll workers that you need assistance if you need assistance. It is something that you're entitled to. It is something that has been deemed to be an accommodation. It doesn't need to be, it can be the person of your choosing. So you are free to come to the polling location with someone that you want to assist you. And that is a completely acceptable thing. If you're a voter with a service animal, Election officials have a duty under the Americans with Disabilities Act to provide a reasonable accommodations to voters. And voters with service animals are permitted to bring service animals into polling locations so that you can vote. So this means that you cannot be kept out of your polling site or told that you're not allowed to enter just because you have a service animal. So what happens if you're a voter who is thinking, oh, I think I want to vote by mail, but maybe you didn't get your ballot. Maybe you didn't get it in time. It's coming too close to the election and you're worried it's not going to be received by your county in time by the 8 p.m. deadline on election day. Can you vote at the polls? If you originally planned to vote by mail, but you've changed your mind and now you want to vote at the polls. Yes, if you received a mail-in ballot and now have decided that you want to vote in person, you need to go to your polling location with your mail-in ballot and the envelopes that came with it. You don't need to complete that mail-in ballot. You do need to hand it over to poll workers so that they can do what's called spoiling it. And that means that they will essentially make it clear that that is not a valid ballot anymore. And once you've handed that over and it's been spoiled, you would be allowed to go vote in person, just like anyone else, just as if you had never requested a mail-in ballot and had planned to vote in person all along. If you requested a mail-in ballot and never received it because it got lost in the mail, or you mailed it, but you're afraid that it won't get to your county election office on time, you can go to your polling site, your regular polling site, and ask for what's called a provisional ballot. And then it would be, you would complete that provisional ballot just as you would any other. It would be kept separate with the provisional ballots. And then they would determine, if your mail-in ballot got there and your concern was not justified, they would just count your mail-in ballot and they would not count your provisional ballot. It's not that they count both, it's one or the other. They just need to do some verification on the back end after the election. So sometimes we run into other issues when we go to vote, like you go to what you think is your polling place and you're told that you're not registered there and they don't have a record of you. That is another opportunity to vote using a provisional ballot. And then again, or you can go back and double check to see where you are registered using that Am I Registered link. And go to the correct polling location, or you can use a provisional ballot. Every in-person polling site has what's called an accessible voting machine. Now, Pennsylvania, as many other states do, uses paper ballots. And then there are still pieces of accessible voting equipment that allow people to mark their ballot using the accessible voting machine, and then it prints off the paper ballot. Sometimes these accessible voting machines don't operate properly, or they haven't been properly configured. If that happens, again, notify your judge of elections, notify one of the poll workers at your polling location so that they can troubleshoot and remedy and fix any issues with the accessible voting machine. Sometimes, again, you ask for a provisional ballot because you've decided to go vote in person and they don't give you one for whatever reason. You should always, again, ask for help from a poll worker, ask to speak to the judge of elections. You can call your county board of elections. And you can also contact Disability Rights Pennsylvania or other election hotlines that are operable and running on election day. So it's really, really important. I think, we've gone through a lot of information right now. And so I think the one thing is things can happen. Plans don't always go the way we had hoped. And so it's really, really important to make a voting plan. So kind of going back over the things that we've talked about so far this evening. First, check your voter registration. Check to make sure you're registered. If you're not registered, you need to register if you would like to vote in the November 8th election. And then once you're registered, or you verified that you're registered, you have to decide how you want to vote. So do you want to vote by mail or do you want to vote in person? And you'll have to make that decision. Again, you can change your mind if you just think you want to vote by mail and then you want to go in person, and you can change your mind. Do you need assistance with voting? So it's also important to think about, do you need help with voting tasks? If you do, who do you want to help you? Who would you like to have help you? Identify a couple people. How and when would you like them to help you? And how would you like to receive their help? And what's a backup plan? So say you have a friend or a trusted family member that you would like to help you vote, but maybe they're ill and can't drive you on election day because they have a stomach bug or something like that. Who would you have help you if your number one person's not available? Who are your number 2 and 3? It's really important to have those backup plans. If you think that you want to have a certain type of help, but then maybe you change your mind, think about the ways that you most feel supported, how you communicate, how you feel supported by others, and make sure to document all of those things. And it can just be a piece of paper that you keep so that you have it planned out and you know what your plan is, and who those trusted folks in your life are. So you know you're registered to vote. You've decided how you want to vote. You've created your voter plan, and you know that you've identified the people you want to help you, how you think you might need help. Do you need a ride to the polls? Do you need assistance in marking your ballot? Do you need to use the accessible voting machine? Do you need to find a designated agent to pick up and return your mail-in ballot for you? You've identified all those things. It's also really important before you vote to learn about who you're voting for. And there's a number of ways to do that. So let's talk about those now. First, you can look up the candidate's voting record. So many times the people who we're voting for are already elected to office. They are already in the Senate or the House. And you can look at how they voted on bills or issues that matter to you. So maybe healthcare matters a lot to you, or funding for home and community-based services, or, name the issue, education and inclusion. You can look up their voting record and see how they voted on different issues. And maybe that helps you to understand who you feel like is the best candidate that you would like to support. You can also look in your local newspapers. You can read them online. You can look in the good old-fashioned printed out newspaper. Maybe there are issues, like I said, that really matter to you. So you can kind of save those, look back at them later, and look at a number of them together to decide who you feel like is the candidate that you'd like to vote for. Many people talk about issues that matter to them with the people that they care about in their lives. Talk with your family and friends, talk about what matters to you, and hear what matters to them, and why they might think something. It doesn't mean that they should tell you how to vote, but they can be important conversations in learning and thinking about issues from different perspectives, or different things that you might not have come across on your own. Many candidates also do interviews, both on TV, on the radio. I'm sure they're doing podcasts right now and all kinds of things, Facebook Lives. Look for that information. Listen to what they're saying about disability services or other things that matter to you. I think one of the most important things in public policy, as well as influencing and just educating members of the legislature or the governor's office, or any agency, is sharing your experiences. So you've had an experience in your life that kind of helps you or informs how you look at an issue. Maybe you've had a hard time accessing healthcare or keeping a direct support professional, and you want to share that with other people that you care about so that they can also understand why an issue is important to you, and when funding decisions are being made about services or priorities, people can understand the real life impact of the decisions that are being made by an administration. And then finally, you can make a checklist after you've kind of looked at all of these things and thought about all these things. Make a checklist of what's most important to you, what really matters, what are your top 5 issues that matter the most to you, that you feel like impact your life in the biggest ways. And then you can go to the candidates' websites or look for, like I said, news articles, interviews, and check to see if they're talking about these issues that matter to you. Do they have a healthcare policy platform? Do they have a disability rights policy platform? Do they have, whatever the issue is that matters to you? You can look and see if they're talking about those things. And if they are talking about them, do you like what they're saying? Do you wish that they were saying something different? Do you feel like they need to understand that they don't really understand the issues? Those are all important things to consider before you cast your ballot. So I just have here at the end some helpful voter resources. The first one is the Votes PA website. That is the Pennsylvania Department of State website that has a number of, they have frequently asked questions. That's where you can also get information about the different ways to vote. The Voter Services website is where you can complete those mail-in ballot applications online if you want to, do your voter registration online if you choose to do that. And then Disability Rights Pennsylvania also has a number of election resources and publications that are available pertaining to the 2022 general election. So I know that this is a lot of information. And I'm happy to take any questions that folks have.
Number 1, can you request a mail-in ballot if you voted in person for the primary?
Yes. So that's a great question, Dustin. Yes, you can. So you would just need to fill out the mail-in voting application prior to the election. So at 2 weeks out, and you would be able to vote by mail in the November election. Pennsylvania has done a few different things with mail-in voting, but yes, you can kind of go back and forth as you wish and decide that you want to vote in person or vote in mail. So that's a great question. And I see, Dustin, your second question is, how do I find out about early voting? If you remember, I had said in this presentation that you really, all you need to do the early voting is take your mail-in application to your local office, your county election office, return that application, ask the staff for your ballot right at that time, complete the ballot, and then return the ballot to your county office. There is information about early voting on the Department of State website. I think it's under frequently asked questions for voter services. But so there is information there as well. I'm sure if you contacted your county election office, they would also tell you when a good time might be to come in and complete that early voting process. But it is available. It is kind of like that one-stop opportunity. It's, I think, appealing for some folks in the disability community because we know transportation can be a real barrier to getting places, particularly in rural parts of the state. So it's certainly an option. Go to the Department of State website if you want more information. I don't think we have a publication on it, but the Department of State certainly does have information on it. And I just like to say too that I mentioned at the beginning that we have that voting rights grant. We do voter education and engagement, these trainings. You can absolutely call our organization and ask questions. So we're going to partner with Election Protection. So you'll call 1-866-R-VOTE for assistance on election day. And we're always available for questions if you have them.
But everyone, thank you so much and have a good evening. Go vote.